Well, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Grateful to have this opportunity to address what I think is one of the most pressing questions that exists in our cultural moment. We're going through this series that we're calling Questioning Christianity, where we're looking at different questions that can be posed about the Christian faith. And our goal in this is really threefold. One, we just want to help you. We want to help you with questions that you might have yourself. Our church is a church that's not scared to be honest. We're not scared to be open about the questions and even doubts that we can have. Because if there is a God who is the truth, then any genuine seeking of the truth should only ever lead us closer to Him. And so we have nothing to fear from asking questions. And so we want to help just answer these things and talk with these things. And then second, we want to equip you. We're a church that doesn't exist just for our own faith to grow. No, we want to be used to influence others around you. And so we want to equip you to know how to navigate these different questions that can come, not just so that you can know how to think about them better, but so that you can engage people, your friends, family, neighbors, coworkers. You can engage people in your sphere of influence. You can engage them more effectively. And then third, we really just want to prepare you. Our culture is becoming increasingly hostile to things of faith. And so we want to prepare you that if you have faith, to know how to hold it strongly against the tide of popular opinion. This morning, I think we're coming to one of the more pressing questions that can exist. Are we better off just not having religion in general, not being divided by religion? And I think that question comes from the reality that religion can often be used as a tool for violence, for oppression, and for division. That might sound an odd thing for a pastor to say, but any honest reading of history shows that religion can at times certainly be a harmful thing. And I think it's because religion, in many ways, can sometimes set us up on a slippery slope. Because what religion is saying, hey, here's the truth, and here's the way to perform that truth. That's what religion's talking about. It's talking about here's the truth, and here's a way to perform that truth. And so if you think that you know the truth, and if you think that you are performing that truth, then naturally you're going to feel superior to others who do not have the truth, and who are not living and doing the same things that you are. And so religion can breed an air of superiority, which can allow us to dehumanize others and justify all kinds of negative actions towards them. And so, what do we do with this question? What do we do with this question? Well, certainly I don't think that we should just do away with religion. I think there is another way forward that we're given in this scripture that was written by this man named John. You might be familiar with the man named John. He was one of Jesus' original 12 disciples. He wrote one of the 4 biographies about Jesus, known as the Gospel of John. And he also had this church that he pastored, this church that he loved. And he wrote a series of 3 letters to this church. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And one of the themes throughout these letters is that he wants to equip this church to know how to handle and navigate the different kinds of teachings that were coming their way. This was a church that lived in a pluralistic society, very similar to ours, and that there were very many people teaching and believing various things. And so John wanted to tell them, hey, how do we navigate all these differences? I want to note as we go through this text that this sermon is going to be a little bit different than the typical way that we preach here at Christ Church. Typically, we are, first of all, just in one book of the Bible. And throughout this series, we're going to be in various books of the Bible. But typically, we kind of go in one book, and we go through it line by line. But really, what we're doing here is we're looking at different texts that address these different questions we can have in effective ways, and not necessarily working through it line by line, but instead looking at just different ways this text speaks to this question at hand. And I think really there's one way this text speaks to this question. But before we get to that one way, I think we have to look at how this text speaks about kind of the answers that our culture can give to this question. Right? As we ask this question of aren't we better off not being divided by religion? As we ask that question, I think there's really two answers that our culture gives. And this text addresses those two answers. So we're going to look at that, the two answers our culture gives, and how this text addresses those answers. And then we're going to see another way forward that this text lays out for us. And so let's get into it together this morning. The first answer that I think our culture gives with, aren't we just better off not being divided by religion? The way they say is, yes, we are, and so let's just do away with religion altogether. Let's do away with religion altogether. There can be this idea that religion is really a holdover from less progressive times when we didn't know as much as we know now about the world. And so religion is really, how we used to be able to describe weather patterns, or how we used to be able to describe things that we can't, we now can describe by science. And so the more that we understand things scientifically, the less we need religious answers and explanations. And so we really should just do away with religion. If people have religion, what they need is they just need better education. We should educate the religion out of people. In the 1960s, John Lennon said, Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right, and I'll be proved right. Here's the challenge, though. He's actually been proved wrong. Since he's made that statement, here's what we have to understand. Yes, Christianity and religion in general is certainly declining in America and in Western Europe, no doubt. There's less and less people who are engaging with matters of faith in kind of the Western world, if you will. But one of our challenges as Americans is that we forget there's kind of a world outside of America. There's a world outside of just Western civilization. And what we see as you kind of look globally is religion, and Christianity in particular, is not going away at all. In fact, it's seeing increased growth in ways that are exponentially more than it even was before. And so the Pew Research Group, which is one of the major research groups in the world, they recently did a study on the growth of Christianity around the world. These are some stats they've had of how Christianity has grown since the 1950s. So in Africa, Christianity has grown from 9% to 50%. In Korea, the country that's seen the largest growth, it's gone from 1% to 60%. Latin America, which right now is one of the hubs of Christian growth, is over 70%. And even China, which in the 1970s decided to make Christianity illegal and to kick out all Western missionaries, what happened is, instead of that stamping down the Christian faith, it actually led to exponential growth of the Christian faith. Because once the missionaries left, what happened is indigenous people, who are always far more effective at reaching their culture than outsiders, the indigenous people of China began to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, and it has gone like wildfire. Christian growth has increased in China year over year by 10% every year since the 1970s. And it estimated about 10 years, China is going to have the most Christians in the world. And so we're saying that if we're saying that we just need to kind of educate the religion out of people, are we saying that all those countries and cultures and people groups, that they're all uneducated? If we think that religion is going to go away with greater education, we need to understand that's a very culturally narrow view, and I would even say ethnically biased, if not racist. Because there are all kinds of ways that faith is flourishing around the world. It is not going anywhere anytime soon. And so the question I think we should ask is, why is faith still growing then? If we're increasing in knowledge, why is faith still growing? If faith is in many ways under more overt persecution, more countries now where it's illegal to be a Christian, if that's happening, then why is Christianity thriving in those places where it is illegal to actually believe those things of faith? Well, I think verse 1 kind of hints at an answer. Verse 1 tells us, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world." So this is really interesting. John is warning them about false prophets. But notice, he doesn't tell them to test the false prophets and their teaching. That's not what he says. No, he says, you need to test the spirits. See what he is saying up here. He's saying behind every teaching, behind every prophet, every teacher, there is something underneath that going on. There is a spiritual realm that exists. What John is saying is that we are all spiritual beings. When people are teaching things, they're not just teaching things on intellectual level. No, there are spiritual realities at play. To be a human is to be someone who is a spiritual being. We are hardwired with a desire for transcendence and meaning and purpose, the things that spirituality gives us. Even the most convinced atheists will recognize that we are spiritual beings. Sam Harris, who is certainly no friend of religion, he wrote a book called Waking Up, which is a book that's all about how to have and be a spiritual person without religion. And he's recognizing that there is a need that all of us have in our basic psychology and makeup to be spiritual people. We are by nature spiritual beings. And so, if we're just going to try to do away with religion, we're engaging in a task that will never actually be accomplished. Because we can't deny the nature of who we are. By our very nature, we'll always be grasping for some transcendent meaning. And so, to say that we can just kind of do away with religion and that's the answer to, how religion should divide us, we'll just do away with it altogether, that's a culturally narrow, ethnically biased, and I think it's actually not recognizing the very nature of who we are as human beings. We are spiritual beings. And so, we can't kind of do away with religion. This is why efforts to stop it have never worked and will never work. We just can't stop being who we are. But I think the second answer that our culture gives, which is probably the more popular answer, is, okay, yeah, these things aren't going anywhere, get that, but we need to keep religion private and personal. That's what we should do with the religion. We're spiritual beings. We're going to have our different beliefs. You're going to all have your different take on the truth about spiritual things. That's fine, but just keep it to yourself. Keep it kind of personal and private. And when you come out into the public, when we're talking about things like, laws or things regarding society or the mores of culture, don't bring your religion into that. Just keep that to yourself and come to these things on neutral ground. And so Richard Rorty, who is a philosopher at Princeton University, he really was one of the big proponents of this. It's the idea of just being pragmatic. Listen, let's just have practical solutions and kind of keep religion and spirituality out of it. Well, I think this text, again, kind of shows us why that won't work. In verse 5, when it's talking about people, it's talking about, the whole thing is talking about addressed to Christians, right? So people are coming from a Christian worldview. But then notice what it says in verse 5. It says, they are from the world, meaning people who don't have a Christian worldview. They are from the world, therefore they speak from the world, and the world listens to them. Do you see what John is saying here? It's pretty profound. It's saying, hey, you are coming from a Christian perspective. They are coming from a world perspective. But both people are coming from a perspective. Right? Both people are acting not on neutrality. They're acting out of a certain set of preconceived presuppositions, beliefs. Right? Everyone is acting out of a certain set of beliefs. And so yes, Christians are coming from a particular worldview that's not neutral, but so too is everyone else. They're coming from a particular worldview that's not neutral. We all have a perspective on life. We all have a worldview that kind of shapes how we interact with the world around us. And so to say that we need to keep kind of religion out of it, I think is to actually misunderstand what religion is. Fundamentally, religion is not just a set of beliefs about God. It can't be that because Buddhism is classified as religion And Buddhism doesn't believe that there is a God. And so religion is not necessarily a set of beliefs about God. What religion really is, it's a set of answers to the big questions of life. That's what religion is. It's a set of answers to the big questions of life. The big questions like, why am I here? What is right and what is wrong? What is wrong with this world and how can I fix it? What are the important things that I should be doing with my life? These are the big questions of life, and no one operates in life without answers to these questions. No one operates in life without answers to these questions. Even the material naturalist who says, well, I only believe things that can be proven scientifically, that statement is not a statement that can be proven scientifically. Like you can't take a statement and you can't take a belief and put it under a lab microscope. You can't see it. No, it's an idea. It's a philosophy. It's a certain way of viewing the world. The point is that we can't keep our worldview out of anything. Right? When we come together to make laws, there's no way that we could possibly do that on the ground of neutrality. Let me just give you one example. So, think about divorce laws. And I'm taking that particularly because, if you think about there's one thing that we should kind of be practical about, it's how we, what we think about relationships and how we should end them and can end them. Like, how do we go about doing that, right? Let's keep religion out of it. Religion should have nothing to do with that. Let's just think about that neutrally. But the reality is no one's thinking about that neutrally. We're all coming from a perspective on that. And so kind of in our Western world, which is more individualistic, the highest thing that we value is personal happiness. That's what matters most in life. That each person is kind of personally happy and fulfilled. The individual is more important than the community. And so because of that, in the Western world, divorce laws are generally pretty easy because we want to facilitate people being able to pursue their personal happiness. If something's not making you happy, you should get out of it. Right? That's what our laws are coming from. But if you go into the Eastern world, which values the community more than the individual, the highest value is not the individual's happiness. No, the highest value is what's actually going to be best for the community as a whole. If you look in those societies, what you'll see is divorce laws are actually really, really hard and really, really strict. See, both are coming from a certain presupposition. Both are coming from a certain perspective that informs how they think about the laws they have. And so when we say, hey, listen, we just got to keep kind of religion out of it, I think a lot of times what we're saying let's just do what works. Let's just be practical. What we're really saying, if we're a little more self-aware, is we're saying, hey, we want to give our cultural viewpoint a more privileged position than yours. That's what we're saying. Hey, let's just do what works. What we're saying is, I think we should do what works according to me and according to my Western, Americanized understanding of the world. And I think that should have a more privileged position than other things. Again, we're being culturally narrow. Michael Perry, who's a church and state lawyer, scholar from Wake Forest University, he says this: to say that religious reasoning must be kept out of the public square because it is faith-based and controversial is itself a statement that is faith-based and controversial and must be thrown out on its own terms. Do you see what he's saying? To say that you need to keep religion to yourself because it is faith-based and it's a controversial thing to bring it out, that statement is itself a faith-based statement and therefore it should be thrown out on its own terms. And what John is saying here in this passage is that everyone is coming from some kind of perspective. And so it's very popular in our culture to struggle with this idea of exclusivity, this idea that there's only one way, that there's only one truth, right? We want to say, well, there's no such thing as exclusive beliefs. But when you say there's no such things as exclusive beliefs, what you're saying is that that itself is an exclusive belief. To say that there is no universal truth is to make a statement that you expect to be taken as a universal truth. These things collapse in upon themselves. They are self-refuting. The reality is we cannot get away from exclusivity. We cannot get away from thinking that our beliefs are somehow not going to influence how we live. No, they absolutely do. I think we should just be honest about it. See, we have to be honest about it. We have to understand that every belief system is exclusive in and of itself. Even the belief system that says there is no exclusive belief is going to be exclusive against those who have an exclusive belief, right? Everyone is coming from a place of exclusivity. And so, it's really popular in our culture to kind of talk about the mountain analogy. Like, hey, listen, there's just this mountain that is our spiritual life. And we all have different paths that we're taking. And what we should do is just respect each other on our different paths and recognize that we're all generally going to go to the same place and end up at the same destination. And that can sound nice. That can sound really tolerant. But actually, I want to argue that's incredibly disrespectful. Because you're changing what every religion says about itself. Every religion, every thought, even the atheistic thought, is saying that they have an exclusive view on the way things are. And it's disrespectful to say that what they believe is not actually what they believe. No, give people the credit of saying that this is actually what they believe. Give them the credit of saying that there are different things. And so, like, for example, you have Buddhism, right? Okay, we're all just on different paths. Well, Buddhism says that there is no God. So when you get to the top of the mountain, there's no one there. There's no one there. Just a greater, heightened, enlightened awareness of yourself. What's diametrically opposed with a Muslim person who believes that, no, Allah's waiting for you at the top. Which is diametrically opposed to the Jewish person who has no idea what to do with the Gentile world, but for the Jewish person, Yahweh's waiting for them at the top. And that's diametrically opposed with the Christian person who believes that there's a Trinity at the top, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, only one God, but existing in three beings. And then you've got Hinduism, which is the idea that there's actually no way to get to the top. What happens is as soon as you get to arriving there, you get put back at the start of the journey again, and you go about it in a different way. You keep reincarnating yourself. These things are all different from each other. And if we're going to say they're all true, I think it's actually disrespectful. It's changing what these religions are saying about themselves. Like, okay, well, maybe it's disrespectful, but it's a better way to live. It's more practical just to believe that all these things could be true. But then I have to think, did we actually take logic in school? I mean, one of the most basic, fundamental, proven laws of logic is the law of non-contradiction. All rationality and thought and meaning is founded upon that one thing. The law of non-contradiction says something cannot be both true and false at the same time. Something is either true or something is either false. So, for example, if I say the Eagles are a football team, that's either a true statement or it's not a true statement. Right? I can't say they are a football team and someone else argue they are not a football team and somehow those two things are same at the same time. No, it's like if we can all have our own take on that, and if you can have the Eagles be a football team and not a football team at the same time, what are we even talking about? Right? If the law of non-contradiction doesn't exist, how can we possibly have any kind of meaning in anything? How do we know any words that we're saying make any sense? I mean, you reduce the world to a completely irrational world. We have to believe that something can either be true or something can either be false. But this kind of irrational thinking gets applied to religion all the time. And so, Buddhism would say, oh no, let's be accepting of all. But you're saying there's no God, and therefore that's against the Muslim and the Christian and the Jewish faith, which says there is a God. And so these things can't both be true. That just makes no kind of logical sense. And I want to say today that I think it's actually a lot more respectful to do what John did here, and that's just to be honest that we have different perspectives and be willing to disagree with one another. It's really only a modern phenomenon that affirming a person means also affirming everything they believe. Right? That's what we believe in our culture. It's like, hey, if you don't affirm every single thing about a person and what they believe about themselves, you're not affirming them as a person. But how juvenile and shallow is that? I mean, I've got all kinds of friends. They don't affirm everything they believe. We disagree about what the best food is to eat. We disagree about what the best sport is and what the best sports team is to cheer for. We disagree about the big questions of life and the little details. Like, we disagree about all kinds of things, and guess what? We can put on our big boy pants and still be friends with one another. Because I can like someone and enjoy someone and not have to affirm every single thing about that person. Affirming someone as a person does not mean you have to agree with everything they say. It can't mean that. It's actually, if you think about it, it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? But this is the stuff that our culture is putting out again and again and again. But I think we'd be better served just to be honest. Just to be honest and recognize that exclusive beliefs are not going away. They're not going away. We all have a certain way of answering the big questions of life. We all have a certain spirituality to ourselves. That's not going away. And so what we should do is, instead of saying it's going away, or instead of saying that, hey, what we believe, it doesn't really matter, no, we should do each other the favor and pay each other respect of saying that what we believe matters and having conversation about it. And so what the thinking person should really do is not try to pretend that there is no exclusive belief. I think what the thinking person should really do is ask themselves the question, what exclusive belief best promotes human flourishing, collaboration, and harmony? If we all have a set of preconceived ideas, if we all have a set of presuppositions, if we all have a particular worldview that we're coming from, the question that we should ask ourselves is, what worldview, what set of exclusive beliefs is best going to promote human flourishing, collaboration, and harmony? And so that really takes us to the third answer that I think John gives us here. This answer to the question is, should we just do away with religion that divides us? No, what we should do is we should have a religion that leads to promoting peace. That's what we should do. We should have a religion that leads to promoting peace. In this passage, John makes a case for the Christian faith. He makes a case for a Christian faith in actually a variety of ways. I only have time to really get into two. I only have time to get into two. He gives kind of two unique things about the Christian faith that I think should make it compelling for us to consider as the belief we should give ourselves to. And again, people are going to say, no, don't talk about what's unique. Talk about what we have in common. Find common ground. Well, the reality is, of course we have things in common with other faiths. Of course we have things in common with other faiths. But it's not our commonalities that we should be discussing. It's the uniquenesses. It's the distinctions. Right? That's what allows us to make the choice of what faith we want to have. When I was thinking about making the choice of marrying my wife, I didn't sit there and be like, well, let me consider all the ways that she has in common with other women. Right? No, it was about thinking of the unique things about her that led me to want to be attracted to her and to enter into a relationship forever with her. Right? It was the unique things that made her compelling to me. And so yes, there's things in common. Certainly there's things in common. But it's the unique things that really should be considered. And so I want to look just at two unique things that John kind of addresses here. They both come in verse 10. We're going to look at the unique need for salvation, and then we're going to see the unique method of salvation. The unique need for salvation and the unique method of salvation. The unique need for salvation, he says in verse 10, in this is love, not that we have loved God. John starts with kind of creating a problem. He starts by saying this is the fundamental issue with all of humanity. We do not love God. Now you might be saying, well, time out. I love God. I've been thinking about God since I was a young person. I've always been a spiritual person. I have an affection for God in my heart. Well, we need to understand how love is defined by God. John, when he was recording his biography about Jesus, this is what he says that Jesus taught in John chapter 14, verse 15. He says, if you love me, you will obey my commands. See, love for God was never meant to be just a feeling severed from action. No, love for God is always meant to be a feeling that leads to a lifestyle of following him. And really, I would say this is the only way that love could ever possibly be. I mean, if a husband says that he loves his wife and yet repeatedly breaks the vows that he's made to her in various kinds of ways, repeatedly with no desire to change whatsoever, but he says, oh no, I still feel love for her, you'd be saying, wait, that's not matching up. You might feel that in the moment, but apparently you don't feel that deep enough to have it influence the choices that you're making. But this is the issue that we have with God. We might give lip service or even genuine thought that we love God, and yet the reality is we want to do things our way. We don't want to live his way. We want to do what, Frank Sinatra and John Bon Jovi sang about. We want to do it my way, right? That's the anthem of American person. But this gives us a problem because this says that what we're doing is we're actually not loving God. And this provides the need we have for salvation. We have a need to be saved from our love affair with ourselves. We have a need to be saved from this disconnect that we can have between what we maybe think and feel versus what we do. We have a need to be saved from that. And Christianity starts with addressing this need. Christianity always starts with saying that, hey, we have a problem. In Acts chapter 2, when Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, gets up and gives kind of the first great sermon that ever given in the New Testament era. 3,000 people became Christians that day. How does he start the sermon? He starts the sermon by saying, hey, here's your problem. And he lays out the problem they have. He traces it out through history. And then the people just say, well, what can we do about that? What can we do to be saved? Right? Christianity always starts with addressing and showing and highlighting the need for salvation that we have. All right, so here's what's important about this. If that's where we start, then the last thing a Christian should ever be is thinking themselves superior to other people. The last thing we should ever be is thinking ourselves superior to other people, because if you're a Christian, the first thing that you're saying is, I have a problem. The first thing you're saying is, I'm not better than anyone else. No, in fact, I recognize that I have a problem with God. To be a Christian means that you're someone who knows that you do need to ask for forgiveness. You're not someone who's saying that, oh, I've never had to ask for forgiveness in my life. No, a Christian can never say that statement. You're saying that you do need to ask for forgiveness. You're recognizing that you do have a problem. And this is why when I think about some of the recent conversations that our country's having about racial relations, it should be Christians who are the first to say, yes, we recognize this is probably an issue, and this is probably an issue that exists in me. Christians should have no problem with being self-reflective because we believe that we have sinful hearts. And so the last thing a Christian should ever do is act superior or arrogant or think that we're better. No, the first thing that we do to become a Christian is to realize that we're not better. To realize that we have a need. That we have a need. And that we have a need that we do not meet ourselves. That we do not meet ourselves. Notice what verse 10 goes on to say. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins. The word propitiation is a big word that means to appease anger. To appease anger. God feels anger towards our sin against Him, which makes sense if we understand how much God loves us. The more you love someone, the more you care if they hurt you. Right? And so if someone wants to say nasty things about me on the internet, which people do, I'll be honest, you're wasting your time. I really don't care. If I don't know you, I could care less what you have to say about me. But if my wife says something, oh, she knows how to cut me where it hurts. And why does it hurt? Because I love her more than anyone. Now, just to be clear, she rarely does that at all. She's one of the most loving people I know consistently. But I'm just, by way of illustration, saying this, that the more you love someone, the more you're affected when they take actions against you. And so God loves us more than we could possibly ever imagine. He made us. He knows us. He cherishes us. And so when we sin against Him, when we choose to live our way instead of His way, when we choose to just do life on our own terms, when we choose to say we have love but not act in love towards God by following Him, of course that cuts God very deeply. And so we should expect God to feel anger. Don't we feel anger when we feel when we see wrong being done? When we see wrong being done, if someone is going to abuse one of my children, you better believe I'm going to get angry about that. And if I don't get angry about that, if I don't want justice for that, there's a problem with me. If I'm just going to allow that continue to happen, oh, I'm okay, it's not that big a deal, don't worry about it. No. If someone's messing with my kids, they're going to have a problem with me. And I'm going to want justice to happen. And so it is with God. It's right to get angry at things that are wrong. It's right for God to get angry because he loves us and because he is fully just. But here's what's amazing about God. God in his justice comes and pours out his anger, not on us, but on Christ who came as one of us. Jesus Christ came as one of us. Verse 2 says that Christ has come in the flesh. In the flesh. Why is it saying that? Because Jesus came and identified with our humanity. God became one of us so that he could took what all of us deserve upon the cross. And so when we think about this, we need to understand that for the Christian, religion, our faith, is not about performing. No, it's about believing Jesus Christ who has performed for us and what he's done for us on the cross. I started the sermon by saying that religion can set us up with this slippery slope about feeling superior because we perform better than others. Oh, friends, the gospel of Jesus Christ undercuts that superiority, not just by showing our need for Jesus, but by showing that we are saved not through our own actions, but through his. And so the one whose testimony is, I have not loved God, but God has loved me. What do we have to boast in? What do we have to feel superior about? Nothing. Nothing at all. And not only that, not only do we have no grounds for superiority, but we have every reason to love other people. We have every reason to love other people. This is where John immediately takes us. As he talks about how God has loved us, he says, beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. This is why the Christian faith should never be a divisive faith. It should never be a faith that leads to violence and oppression. No, the outcome of the Christian faith, those who are living consistently with what they believe, should always be lavish expressions of love. The Christian should want to love as we have been loved. Right? As God has been compassionate to us, oh, we should want to be compassionate to others. As God has been patient to us, we should want to be patient with others. As God has been gentle and kind with us, we should want to be gentle and kind with others. As God has been self-sacrificial, did not even pursue his own good, but laid down his life for us, oh, we should not be willing to withhold any good from other people. We should not go through life selfishly thinking of ourselves. No, we should go through with a self-sacrificial spirit, with a desire to do good. And notice, all this came on God's initiative. God initiated all this love towards us. And so we as Christians should be initiating this love towards others, not based on how they treat us. A Christian should never interact with someone else based upon how that person treats them. No, a Christian should always react to other people based upon how God has treated us. We don't treat others as we've been treated by them. We treat others as we've been treated by God. And so this is why the Christian faith, if you're going to have one exclusive faith, if you're going to believe one thing, and we all believe one thing, friends, this is why this one thing should make us people who are all about human flourishing. Because we love others. And so even if they don't believe like we do, we should want to see them prosper as much as possible. This should lead us to want to collaborate with others. Because we don't think we have it all together. We know that we don't. This should seek to make us people who care about harmony and the promotion of peace because we love others. Sadly, this isn't always the case. Be the first to admit, Christians often can allow their Christianity to make themselves feel superior. But we have to understand if they're doing that, and if you're doing that, we can all be tempted to do that. The problem is not with your faith. The problem is you're not being consistent with your faith. If someone is being unloving in the name of Christianity, their issue is that they are not being Christian enough. Growing maturity as a Christian is not just growing in theological discernment and the ability to point out other people's errors, the ability to, I'm aware of all these concerns and the culture and all these problems, and they're just always speaking negatively. No, growing maturity as a Christian should always be marked by growing love for other people. And so if you're here and you're listening to this as a Christian, I would just ask you the question, what tempts you to look down on others? Or should I say, who tempts you to look down on them? What are ways that you can treat others as they treat you? Friend, as you think about this, I think this text would call you to go again to the cross of Jesus Christ, to be more consistent with your faith, to repent and ask for forgiveness, and start treating others not as they treat you, but as God has treated you. And if you've yet to believe in Jesus, I hope that you see that we all have an exclusive belief in something, but there's a big difference if that something is not based on your performance. There's a big difference if that something is not something that leads you to feeling superior by others. No, it's a big difference that something is something that humbles you and leads you out in love, which is what I think the Christian faith clearly does. And so I just want to encourage everyone who's listening to this to consider placing your faith in Jesus Christ, in the God who has showed the initiative to come and live amongst us, to die on the cross for your sins so that you could know him. I pray that you consider that. We all have some kind of exclusive faith. It's the uniqueness about the Christian faith that I think makes it so compelling. Jesus is beautiful. Jesus is beautiful, and I pray that you would consider the beauty of who he is and that you would put your faith in him. Let's bow our heads.